had on Friday. Since we have this quiz coming up tomorrow, I'd rather you not take it today. I want to make sure you understand how to do this stuff. Then tomorrow I'll do a quick review, and then you guys will have the whole period to do 6 problems of the quiz. Open note again. So if any of you want to start the test after the quiz, that would be fine. We just have to do it by Friday, okay? And if you need to stay during lunch, that's fine, or go get your lunch and come back. Did I say something to offend you?
Yeah,
No. Oh, French. Okay, watch the video. Okay. All right, so does that make sense, guys? Otherwise, your grades are done. So if you haven't taken the test, that's all that's left. Everybody else, your grade is what's in there. So fresh start today. If you like what you got last quarter, keep up whatever you are doing. If you feel like you need to do better, think about what you can change. You guys know the rhythm of this class now. You know how I do things, so it's pretty predictable. I'm not changing anything, okay? So take good notes. Pay attention when I give you guys the new information, and then put your earbuds in and work on your homework, okay? But please, again, I know I keep saying it, but please be respectful, and while I'm teaching, at least fake it. Act like you're listening, you know? Okay, so I want to remind you that we learned about these weird new letters I before the break, before this weekend, whatever, last quarter. Anytime you have a negative under the radical, it means that you're going to have a lowercase I on the outside, okay? So we had like -4, that would be 2I. We had something like this, and we had to simplify it. That would have been an I on the outside. And remember, we had to find 2 numbers that multiply to get 18, where one of them is a perfect square. So this is just reviewing the last test information, okay? Bottom line is this. If there's a negative under the radical, it becomes an I on the outside. Sometimes when we're combining i's, we get I times I is I squared, just like x times x is x squared, but we can't simplify to x squared. You get x squared, it's just x squared. But I squared becomes what? Do you guys remember? -1. Okay, so we're going to see both of these concepts in our last little bit, right? So what we're doing is, first thing, is solving some 2-step equations, literally 2 steps. Remember, when you solve an equation, you're just trying to get the variable by itself, okay? So what would the first step in this first example be? What? Yeah, how do we move it? You just move it? There's a rule. We would do what? Subtract it. Guys, you're not going to write this stuff down? So I'm going to isolate the x squared. So I'm going to subtract 81 from both sides, right? Remember, I want x, not x squared. Anybody know how I would get the x by itself? Square root. Remember, we do opposite operations. The reason Mandy said to subtract 81 from both sides is because it's the inverse or opposite of addition, right? If you have plus, you do minus. What's the opposite of squaring something? It's square rooting. So I would take the square root of both sides, and we've done this before. We've done this. It just wasn't a negative before. So we get x equals, what comes after the equal sign? Yes, but before even that, when you take the square root of something, you get how many solutions? 2. How do I mark that? Remember the plus or minus in front of the 81? We did this, right? Plus or minus. Remember, we did ones that was like this. If you had this just positive, you'd say, okay, square root of both sides, you get plus or minus 9. When we do the square root of -81, we get plus or minus, make that a 9, 9i. Remember, a negative under the radical, it's the same thing. 9 here, we get 9 the same thing, but with the negative, it becomes an I. So it's plus or minus 9i. Okay? Let's do another one. Subtract 84 from both sides, right? Opposite of plus is minus. Okay, remember, your goal is to get the x squared by itself. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. Just basic equation solving at this point. And when I do negative 84 divided by 3, I get negative 28. Okay? Now, we're not done because we want to get x by itself. So we take the square root of both sides. So x is by itself now. You're always going to get a plus or a minus, and I see a negative under the radical, so I know there's going to be an I. But remember, you're not done unless you can't break it down anymore. Like if I got the square root of 7, there's nothing I could do. I would have just the square root of 7. But 28 can be 4 and 7. Right? 4 times 7 is 28. Sorry, I'm squeezing this in here. So I have plus or minus. There's an I. So the plus or minus. The I was the negative under the radical. 28, I went through my list of perfect squares. 4 and 7, multiply to get 28. Square root of 4 is 2. And then the 7 is left under the radical. And that looks funny. Like, we don't write the letter in front of the number. It's not wrong. It's like writing x2 instead of 2x. So I'm just going to fix it because I don't like it like that. 2I square root of 7. Okay, so we'll practice more of those in the homework together. But it's just like what we were doing last week, except a couple extra steps. Let me just make sure. I feel like I went kind of fast over that. When I'm looking at the square root of negative 28 to simplify it, okay, first I see that there's a negative, so I take care of that. And then remember, you're looking at your list of perfect squares. And if you want to write them on your paper, we'll write them at the top of our homework for sure. So you have them for the quiz tomorrow. 7, 8, 9. Okay, and it goes on forever. What you're looking for is there a number that goes into 28 that's in this list? And of course, 4 times 7. That's where I got the 7. Okay, and the square root of 4 is 2. So it's 2 square roots of 7. There's an I in there, and there was a plus or minus. So that would be the final answer. Okay, so remember, and you guys didn't do wonderful on the breaking down of the radicals last week, so I will go over that more with you guys in the homework. We'll go a little bit slower for those of you that need it, okay? So I'll do those in the homework with you in a few minutes. So tomorrow when you take the quiz, you're just going to go to your notes or your homework and find that type of problem and watch the steps that you did in your homework and your notes, and then you can just kind of replicate that on the quiz. That's the beauty of an open note quiz. I guess I don't have to tell you that. Okay, how about adding and subtracting? Guys, this is the same as if you had x's. You can only add and subtract like terms. Plain old numbers with plain old numbers, those are called constants, like 8 and 9 are a constant, and variables with variables. So when you see a plus sign, just find like terms. Like 8 plus 9, 17. 3i plus negative 7i. 3 minus 7. That's it. A common mistake is some students will square the i's. Remember, if you add 2 x's together, it's just 2x. If I add 2 i's together, it's 2i, not I squared. Okay? It's multiplying that would square it. So x plus x is 2 x's. I plus I is 2 i's. Okay? So that's just 3i minus 7i is negative 4i. The only thing I worry about with this problem, with a minus, is forgetting that that minus goes to everything in the parentheses. You have to distribute the negative. Okay? In other words, this is negative 5 minus negative 3. Or, if you don't want to make the mistake, go ahead and distribute it. That becomes plus 3 minus 8i. Right? It just changes their signs. Then I can just combine like terms. Negative 5 plus 3, negative 2. 5i minus 8i, negative 3. Ask yourself, what would I do if there were x's there? It's the same exact, there's no difference. You don't have to do any imaginary number stuff. It's just a letter in these. And adding and subtracting, it's just a letter. There's no simplifying a radical, because there's no radical. There's no squaring, so you don't have to change something to a negative 1. Okay? So that's 2 of the 3 types of problems. Solving equations, combining like terms, be careful with that negative, make sure both of them get the negative. And then we have one more type of problem, and that's multiplying, which is FOILing. First, outside, inside, last. How do I know this is multiplying? Because 2 parentheses right up against each other means multiply. Now, we've talked about FOIL. You can think of it as distributive property. FOIL means first, outside, inside, last. First, outside, inside, last. Or just think of it, it's almost easier to think, I'm going to do 2 times everything. Then I'm going to do I times everything. And the order doesn't matter, it's multiplication. So 2 times negative 3. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. 2 times negative 2i is negative 4i. We're done with the 2. I times negative 3 is negative 3i. Careful here. I times negative 2i, so it's like, think of it as a 1. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2, right? And then I times I, that's when you get I squared. Remember, I times I is I squared, which we know equals negative 1. This is what I like to say. I squared simply changes the sign of whoever it's standing next to, because it's a negative 1. So negative 2 times negative 1 becomes what? Yep, positive 2. These are like terms. Negative 4i minus 3i is negative 7i. Just bring that negative 6 down. Anything else I can do? Negative 6 plus 2. Guys, I'm not crossing an equal sign here. I'm not adding 6 to 2. Be careful. I'm not crossing over. I'm just combining like terms. Read it left to right. Negative 6 plus 2 is negative 4 minus 7i. Okay? Because I squared is negative 1. Okay, so I have negative 2 times negative 1, which equals positive 2. A negative times a negative is positive. Okay, I'm going to do some of each type with you to help you through the homework. Guys, bring your notes tomorrow. Bring your homework tomorrow. You can use it on the quiz. I'll spend like 10 minutes reviewing beforehand and then 6 questions just like what we're doing right now, okay? Let's start off strong. Okay. So, I'm going to do a bunch of these with you. So you have really good examples with the right answers. If you don't have this, you can take a picture of it in a minute. We're going to start off doing them together. Anyway. Guys, we're doing some really tough stuff starting Thursday. Thursday we start factoring, and you probably haven't factored in a while. I don't think you had to factor in geometry, and who knows what Algebra 1 people taught you. So Thursday is a big, big day in this class. Big, big day. Okay? All right, let's start the homework. So the first set of problems is solving. Yeah, but I don't normally just supply paper for you guys, so you need to get paper for this class first. Okay, so 13, solve. Solve it. We should always get two solutions. Every single one of our answers is going to have a plus or minus in front of it, okay? So we would start out by subtracting 45. Should be writing, this is your homework. Unless you're so good at this, you don't need me. Divide by 5. If you didn't already write the list of perfect squares, I'm going to rewrite them up here. So if you want to have them on your paper, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it continues. But it's nice to have those, okay? So when I get to this part, I still don't have x by itself. I need to get rid of that too, right? So that's the squared. I do the square root of both sides. So I get x by itself. Don't forget to put the plus or minus. And 9 is in this list, right? The square root of 9 is 3. What's the square root of negative 9? 3i. Not negative 3, okay? It's two solutions, a positive and a negative. But if there's a negative under the radical, we're going to have an I in our answer. That's what that means. Okay. Yep. It's in front of every single time you take the square root, you get two solutions. Here's why. Let me just use a simple one, like 9. It's because 9 equals 3 times 3 or negative 3 times negative 3. Yes. Every time. Yeah, every time. So I think I know why you asked me that, Sarah, because when I say plus or minus, that's just what it's called. I don't really mean pick one or the other. That's just what it's called, the plus or minus symbol. Okay, I just thought of that. Okay, so start by moving the 24. Take the square root of both sides. So we get x equals the plus or minus symbol every time. Every time. I know there's a negative under there, so there's going to be an I in my answer. But let's think about that 6 for a second. First of all, 6 is not in there, so it's not a perfect square like 9 was. Is there a number in that list, though, that goes into 6? Besides 1. 1 isn't going to do anything for you, so you really don't use the 1. Because 1 times 6, square root of 1, you're just back to 1. So 1 doesn't, but 4, no, 9. So 6 can't be simplified. All we would do in this problem is pull out the negative. You never leave a negative under the radical. But the 6 has to stay in there. You can't come out. Good job. Question? There's nothing to add or subtract, right? All we have is negative 9 times x squared. So we will divide both sides by negative 9. Nine divided by negative 9 is negative 1. Plus or minus. You're going to use this piece of paper in front of you right now, tomorrow on the quiz. Write yourself a huge note. Don't forget the plus or minus if you're worried about it. But you have to put it there. Okay? We know there's going to be an I because of the negative. And is 1 in that list? Of course. What's the square root of 1? 1. So it's just 1I, or you could just write I, right? Because we normally don't put a 1 in front of an x. We would just write x. It's the same idea. 1I is the same as I. But it would not be wrong if you put the 1 there, okay? 1I is perfectly fine, full credit. Okay? Maybe one more of these with you. Yeah, that's a good idea. I was going to do that on the next one, but I'm going to go ahead and freeze it and work it out. You guys try it too, and then we'll compare, okay? I'm going to make sure that I can get to this step first. So negative 84 divided by 7, I got negative 12. Square root both sides, I have my plus or minus, and I immediately took that negative out. Because I'm looking ahead, I can tell 12 is not in the list, but it has a factor that's in there. Right? What number goes into 12 that's a perfect square? 4. Okay, so x equals plus or minus, the 4 comes out and becomes a 2. The I is already on the outside. And what's left under the radical? 3. Okay, so sometimes you get a perfect square, and you don't have a radical left. Sometimes you get a number that can't be simplified at all, like 6. And sometimes you have a number that you can simplify. The square root of 4. So 12, it was before right? 12 is the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. And the square root of 4 is 2. So I got 2 square roots of 3. Okay? Are we starting to get these? Let's do 17 the same way. Really, I was going to say really quiet. We'll do it really quiet. I'll do 17 without showing you the steps. Hey guys, try it. Try it. on, Evan. But keep going. Yep, so you got x squared equals negative 25, then you have to do square root of both sides. Don't forget. And then the negative needed and I. So 25 is a perfect square, right? So the square root of 25 is 5. The negative under the radical just made it a 5i. Plus or minus in every single one of your answers. 5i. The simplifying. So when you're simplifying, you first want to ask yourself, is the number in that list, like 25? And then it's just going to come out of the radical and become, like, you can put that in your calculator. The square root of 25 is 5. But if it's not in that list, then you ask yourself the next question. Is there a number in this list that goes into it evenly? So when I look at 12, I go, oh, 4 goes into 12. Okay? But remember we had 6. 6 is not in that list, and there's nothing in the list that goes into 6. So that's why it just stayed inside the radical. So the 3 can't come out, right? This is going to become a 2. So, oops, I forgot to, oops, that's not here. That's just x, sorry. So x equals plus or minus. There's a 2 and an I, but the 3 can't be simplified any further. So it's stuck inside. That's something we did last week too, so you might want to go back and look at those. Yeah. Let me just do one more of these other types with you, just to switch gears. Gio, try and jump in with us or come grab the notes from me. Okay, this last one I'll do with you though. I'm going to check on you. So this is addition, so I don't have to change any signs. Okay? If it were subtraction, I'd change all those signs. I'm just looking at like terms. These are the easiest ones on the test, the quiz. 6 plus 4, 10. Right? We did those. Those are done. 1i plus negative 5i. That is it. That's the final answer. Is it.
And now we're defending ourselves with what I have it right now.
So, love it. You pulled that off. I thought you were coming over to take a picture of this.
Huh?
Were you going to take a picture of this?
Oh, no, I don't know.
Oh, you have this?
Yeah,
Okay. All right, so here's the rest of the answers without the work. So, I keep saying I'm not going to do another one. Be careful with like 26, guys, because it's got that minus in there. It's a common place to make mistakes. There's two things you could do here, guys. You could change all the signs, or you could just read it like it is. It's 8 minus 6, right? 8 minus 6 is 2. Done with those two. 3i minus negative 2i. Right? That's what that says. 3i minus negative 2i. What happens to the minus and the negative? So you get positive 5i. Just 3 plus 2. Okay, so I did a lot of those with you. Please do not forget your, hello. Okay. Do not forget to bring any of this tomorrow. Ask questions now. You're going to need to see the paper, the actual problem. Anybody else want to take care of the page? Do you have a iPad or just this one? The bottom?
Run for 6 minutes, that match, and then walk. Run for 6 minutes.
You're welcome.
Maybe way